meeting to order. Wendy, roll call, please.
Manager Mitchell.
Here.
Manager Reed.
Here.
Manager Jones. Manager Smith.
I'm here.
Chairman Landenberger.
Here, we have a quorum. We will continue. Moving on to the approval of last month's meeting minutes. Everybody had a chance to review those? Offer up any changes or? Okay.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Manager Smith, a second by Manager Mitchell for approval of last month's meeting minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Minutes are approved. Moving on then to amendments and approval of the agenda for this meeting. Any changes? I think Dennis, you had some.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, board members, I'd like to add item 6D. Titus Geetson from Brevera Bank is here to share some information on potential investment options.
Okay. Add that. Anything else?
Move to approve as amended.
Okay.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Manager Smith, second by Manager Mitchell to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. The agenda is approved as amended. Moving on to item 4 this morning, comments from members of the public. Not seeing anything this morning. We can move on to McDowell Dam this morning. I think I'll have maybe Dave come up if you want to, Dave. Kind of give a little update on a couple of items this morning for us. Morning, Dave.
Well, this is dangerous, Michael, leaving your laptop here. Can get you in trouble. Actually, just pulling up the traffic counts, so you kind of caught me off guard.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I can pivot really quick. So at McDowell Dam, try to keep you up to date on the traffic counts. Keep true to my promise. Vehicle counts were 11,534. And it looks like we have ants in the trail counter again, because I know there's not 9,000 people on the trail. So we'll have to check on that one. We have a problem every once in a while. The ants try to recolonize in that trail counter. So that number is a little skewed. I'm guessing it accurately would probably be somewhere around the 600 to 700 mark. That's historically what we've been this time of year. Just looking at previous years, yeah, it floats around the 600 mark for July. So other than that, things are going well. Did just get off the phone with the DEQ. The test that was done at the end of July was negligible. It was low. So
good.
Nothing of concern for that water quality test.
Good.
Of course, that's the end of July, so we'll keep an eye on it
Okay.
to see if anything reblooms or anything like that, or anything suspicious, so we can always retest. But
Good.
nothing there. Other than that, still have people visiting, obviously, by the numbers for the vehicles. Everything's going well with that. Have not heard, and I'll have to check in. I know that we're probably, I think, for that playground construction, we're 8 to 12 weeks out for the playground equipment, and I don't think they were going to start until that was on its way. So I'll check with them on their timing with that. We're getting close to that 10-week mark, I believe it was, since it was awarded.
Okay.
The
For your day, are you saying 8 to 12 was the total time, or 8 to 12 from now, you think?
No, it was 8 to 12 from once
Okay.
it was awarded.
Okay,
So
good.
we're getting in that range
Pretty
where
close, yep.
yeah.
Yep. Okay.
So they should start activating out there or mobilizing out there and get into some work here fairly soon. So I hope to see that moving by the next time we talk.
Yep.
That would be good. Insurance claim wise, back in July, we had that hailstorm that dropped baseball-sized hail at McDowell Dam, and there was some damage. We have gone through the report, and we're planning to meet out there and walk through every one of those things to see how we want to address those areas. Preliminarily, I'm thinking we are looking at probably 2 to 3 packages, one just for the asphalt shingles, one for the metal roofing, and one if we move forward with siding and window repairs. And I say it that way because you've got some contractors that specialize in just asphalt shingles and some contractors that specialize in just metal roofing, and some don't cross. Some do both, some don't.
Yep.
I think if we do it that way, we're going to open ourselves up to better competitive quotes. But I think that's the best way to move forward with that.
Okay.
So once we have a game plan, we'll put those packages together and we'll work with, get that out to contractors and hopefully come back with some decent pricing for
Okay.
repairs. As far as that damage was concerned, a lot of good-sized dents. We did have one hailstone actually penetrate the roof, like go all the way through. But that's it. But it was on the metal roof, it wasn't on the asphalt. So, which actually sounds worse when you say it that way. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Other than that, I think everything's been going well. The last storm, there were quite a few trees that did get blown over, and which is somewhat of a blessing and somewhat of a curse. The shelter belts that are out there are ash trees, and they're 5 feet on center. They're planted very densely to forest, and David's testament. They've kept them alive. So it's a good problem to have that you've got trees growing that close to each other in a shelter belt. A lot of times they die off. That's why they're planted so close to each other in a shelter belt. We should probably talk about maybe thinning that a little bit, giving the trees a chance to grow, and also reducing the amount of food when emerald ash borer comes, habitat for that bug. So at some point, maybe we can talk about that when we go out there and just kind of
Yep.
go drive around and point and wave and see what, if we want to do something like that, we can make a game plan towards that as well in the future. Not saying we have to do it right away, but it's just something that's been on David's and mine minds as we continue to manage that property.
Okay, makes sense. Regarding Endorf, so everything's been submitted to them, have they cut a partial check, and how does that, then we gotta turn in as far as getting for the insurance claim?
My recollection, and I don't handle the insurance claims at the Park District, another director does, but from my recollection, how it works is they go out and they inspect everything, they come up with a value of it, and if agreed, I think they will cut a check directly to if you've already got it, Wendy.
We have received a check,
That's
Okay.
Yeah.
and there is some additional funds we can get if possible.
Yep. Yep. So then you receive that, we put it out for quotes. If they match, then that check is all you get, but if it's more, it'll go up to a certain value.
Yeah.
Yep.
And sometimes once the work is done, they'll kind of re-release
Mhm.
Yep.
additional funds to get you up to the full claim, but yeah.
Yep.
But you already got part of that, you're kind of in contact with them. And
Yes.
good, okay. And then what about the issue with that fence? There was maybe where there was some spraying, did that all get resolved?
It did.
Okay.
Yes. The neighbor went and bought some trees and planted them
Oh,
himself,
okay.
and took care of everything. So
Good.
just David went over and talked with him, and he took care of it.
Okay.
Yep.
Then my last question, the ADA updates, or anything going on there? Do we need to, maybe when Chuck's out there too, maybe you guys could visit about some of that too?
I think the biggest thing with the work that we're doing at that playground, it's going to check a couple of boxes off.
Okay.
For accessibility to a shelter, providing paved access to the existing bathroom, albeit the existing bathroom is not accessible, but that is in the game plan, is to replace that bathroom to make that accessible when it is rebuilt. So we can go over it and just
Yeah.
kind of go through an update, but there's a few improvements that we're making just as a result of some new work that we're doing.
Okay.
Yep.
Sounds good. Okay. Any other questions for Dave? Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Dave. Okay. We'll move on to the supplemental water supply this morning. Michael, any updates regarding?
Yeah, a couple things. You'll note in the packet back in February, I didn't receive a copy of it, went directly to the board address, was the extension of the McDowell Dam water permit. Conditional water permit's been extended through February 1st of 2028. So you have some opportunity to continue on with the project you have. Travis has made multiple calls to Mr. Anderson. I see he's here this morning. And have not gotten a full response back from the from him. He says he's still looking at the documentation.
Okay.
So just kind of take that with a grain of salt that obviously he's really busy. As far as the emergency action plan, that's just kind of on the list at the moment. Mary's been busy and we haven't really coordinated on getting something done. The Van Beek easement, of course, has been recorded, and I believe you've approved authorized payment for that, and I think Wendy took care of that here. So that's out of the way. I guess the other aspect is that once the final easement is in place, the consideration of the grant application process, and I believe when that happens, we will just, take it upon ourselves to start putting some things together for whichever meeting occurs for you so that we can have an update as to where that's at rather than waiting a whole month. As far as the bank stabilization and trail protection, maybe I'll just let Travis come up and talk to that because you've got the authorization for payment in your packet. So, Travis, you want to touch on that one?
Morning, Travis.
Right, good morning. I will, the trail stabilization project is complete as you've seen. I've sent out some pictures to the board members so that you guys can review how that work looked when it's completed. And I've also sent you, and in your packet should be the final balancing change order to bring everything up to the actual installed quantities so that we have the total amount for the project so that will match what the contract amount is, and then the first and final pay request for that project for the full amount of the work completed. So it's a pretty easy thing. So.
Yeah, we don't need any action on that. We took action last month, right?
Yeah, I think, but the last meeting, it was already complete, and I just had to finish getting some of the documentation done in the final change order process, so.
Just gotta get it signed and paid. Okay. Curious, Dave, have you taken a look at the bank stabilization? Everything looks good?
Everything looks great.
Okay, good, appreciate that.
So.
Okay?
I think one thing that, if you take a look at the pictures, what was nice is we made the decision as to where the access route was to come in. And in reality, minimal damage as far as the overall through the Aero Club area. So even though it's been reseeded, obviously the roadway impacts were less than we expected. So it looks nice out there.
Mr. Chairman, Travis, while you're up there, is the plan to build the pipeline this fall in McDowell Dam if it's approved?
I guess that's gonna depend on when we finally get the easements in place and get those in hand. Still trying to work with the one remaining landowner who's hasn't signed yet. Doesn't sound like has any issue with signing, and he's agreeable to the project, just a matter of getting that through. But then once we have those easements in hand, then we can finalize the design, because we still have a little bit of work to do on the design. Some of that stuff we were holding off on until we had the easements in place so that we could make sure that we had our route secured. Now that we appear to have that route secured, we can finalize the plans. They're probably 80 to 90% right now. Just a few things to touch up on that, and then we have to write the project manual for the project to put it out to bid. So we could potentially put it out to bid here this fall. I doubt anything would actually get started for construction, because some of the equipment and materials for this project are going to have a little bit of a lead time, specifically like on the intake side and the pump station. But yeah, trying to actually move any dirt yet this fall might be a little bit of a stretch, but we could at the very least get it out to bid potentially if we get that easement secured, and then finalize the plan set and get those out the door to bid.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things I think, do we want to go through an outdoor heritage fund cycle, right? And try to
Right.
get funding through that. So, and that would preclude us going into construction, I believe.
Right.
Okay.
A couple of things on that too, Dennis. We've had conversations with DWR, as we haven't talked to the Outdoor Heritage Fund again, even though they basically last time said come back when you have your easements. So now that you have that, you can come back. Looking at a potential dual grant request, one through the Outdoor Heritage Fund, find out what they will finance, and then go back to DWR and finance the remaining portion that the Outdoor Heritage Fund may not. So we'll start looking into that process once the final easement's in place so that we can maximize the potential grant opportunities. I do not know whether this qualifies, in fact, I don't believe that it does. Dave could probably do that on the, for the garrison diversion grant funds, because they're usually looking at park facilities. This is not a park facility, so just to let you know that that probably wouldn't qualify for that, but we'll keep that in mind as we look through all the opportunities.
Sure. I was just thinking that same thing, garrison diversion. I don't know, through the last commission cycle where they went through that process, maybe they'd be more amenable to cost sharing, something like that. Because it is, I mean, basically it's recreation based, right?
Right.
And so I think I think it's worth a question, I guess, at least. That's right.
Yeah. We will ask the question and get the answer.
So do we know it, when that next Outdoor Heritage Fund cycle?
Usually it's October.
Okay. So maybe the applications are due in here at the
Yeah.
end of August, early September?
Maybe have Travis, if you want to take a look at when the next application deadlines are.
Sure, I can look into that.
All right.
I think we can be prepared relatively quickly for the application, because we've had the application in before. It's just a matter of changing the update in the OPC and a few other items, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Travis. Anything else for Michael?
Nope, that's all.
Okay. All right, we can move on to item 6 this morning, financial reports.
Chairman, board members, on pages 14 and 15 is the balance sheet. So I'll just go through some summary discussion here. Interchecking, we started with $2,160,945.07. We paid bills in the amount of $118,062.83. In July, we had income in the amount of $61,830.24, which included some minor amount of real estate tax collected, state aid, some McDowell Dam income in the amount of $7,500, special assessments. And the majority of that, though, is the NDERF distribution that was shared back with their. So that was the amount. That was $46,000 of that $61,000. So we ended up with a ending balance in our checking account of $2,107,200.15. A Brevera Wealth account, $2,434,246.15 was our starting. We earned a net interest. That's the interest minus the administrative fee of about $8,400. So our ending balance is $2,442,615.56. Reserve fund balance. Had a minor amount of interest, so that's the increase from the previous month. Excuse me. So net total of liquid assets is $5,250,491.20. You can see our special assessment. Excuse me. Let me get down to that page.
The designated funds.
Designated funds breakdown is on page 15. And so those largely remain unchanged, some minor transactions for different funds within those lists. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd move for approval of the balance sheet as presented on pages 14 and 15.
So moved.
Okay, got a motion by Manager Reap and a second by Manager Jones to approve this month's balance sheet. Wendy, take roll call vote, please.
Manager Mitchell,
Yes.
Manager Reed,
Yes.
Manager Jones,
Yes.
Manager Smith. Yes. Chairman Landenberger.
Yes, motion passes, balance sheet is accepted.
Mr. Chairman, board members, continuing on, page 16 has a profit and loss statement. Looked over those numbers. Those are good, and so I'd move for approval as presented in your packet.
So moved.
Got a motion by Manager Reap and a second by Manager Jones to approve this month's profit and loss statement. Wendy, take roll call vote again, please.
Manager Mitchell,
Yes.
Manager Reed,
Yes.
Manager Jones,
Yes.
Manager Smith. Yes. Chairman Landenberger.
Yes, motion passes, profit and loss is accepted.
For item C, the 2026 budget, did grab the preliminary budget off the, I saw it on the website. So our allocation, if you recall, we had requested we'd shown a total budget of 1.2 million for 2026. Part of that is income that we received through our investments. The preliminary budget as presented and approved, if I understand it correctly, by the county commission was 1.33 mils, or about the equivalent of $981,000, which is also about equal to what we received in 2025. So that's where that stands. It'll go through its process. Mr. Chairman or Commissioner Woodcox, it'll be September.
Mr. Chairman, we're having a budget meeting on this coming Monday, but there's nothing that I can see that will be changed, so everything's moving along good. But every meeting we have, we will be looking at everybody's budget and making adjustments accordingly. But as far as I know, nothing's happening so far.
Okay.
Good. Thank you. Thanks, Dennis. Any questions on that? Okay.
And then item D, as amended here, is I'd like to have Titus Gietzen come up. Titus has been our rep for the Bravera Wealth account, and so one of the questions that was asked at a previous meeting was, is there other options, including treasury bills, that we could look into? And so Titus is going to go through a little presentation on that.
Morning, Titus.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Titus Gietzen with Bravera Wealth. As Dennis Reap mentioned, I'm the advisor on the account. So I put together this packet. It gives a outlook as of July 25. This is just good reading material for how the economy is doing year to date. I also included a year to date statement if you wanted to see how our fee structure works and how the account returns have gone year to date as well. There were three CDs this year so far that were redeemed and then deposited into this account, as you can see on page 8. And then if we jump to page 10, you can see the example portfolio that we put together for if you wanted to do CDs or U.S. Treasuries. Our portfolio managers also threw in agencies just to have a balance of an example if you were to move into more of an investment account over cash management account. So with the current money market, you're at a 4.3. Our fee on that is 0.25, so it's a net of about 4.05. And then as you can see from each time segment, 6 months, 9 months, a year, all the way down to 5 years, the CDs usually do have a bigger margin. I know when a lot of people see U.S. Treasuries current rate, that's if you're one of the 20 large banks that can buy those. The U.S. Treasuries that we have access to are secondary market, so they're people who have bought them before and are looking to have cash. So we'd either buy it at a premium or we'd buy it at a loss for them. So just off of par. Were there any questions about the U.S. Treasury aspect to this?
So Titus, just looking at this, and it looks like the U.S. Treasuries are running around that 3.9 to 3.8. And right now we're getting 4.05, right?
Yes.
So at this point.
Well, and with these rates, you would take a quarter off of that as well.
Oh, off that Treasury one?
Yes.
As well? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the one would go from 4.3 down to 4.05 would be our current, the Bravera Wealth
Correct.
fund that we have. Yeah.
And the reason why some people would want to buy longer term is just in case the Fed were to start reducing rates. They didn't reduce in July. There's another meeting in September where the market consensus is around a 50% chance of a 25 basis point drop or a 50% chance of doing nothing. So if they do nothing, obviously the rate should stay close to the same. If they do drop down, we'll see it go down to around 4.05 possibly, and then another reduce with the fee. So yeah.
So if they would reduce rates, would the T-bills drop accordingly as well, I suspect, right?
Yes.
And so, I mean, if I'm reading this right, we are, near term, we're probably just better off just leaving it where it is right now, right? I mean, that would be the advice.
Yeah, depending on liquidity, you might want to look at maybe a 3-year, possibly, if you were wanting to lock it in, because the consensus is possibly that in 3 years you would be better off. Right. But if you averaged out the higher rate today with a gradual downturn, it would be close to the same probably.
Yeah. And we've discussed this before. Our concern with locking for 3 years is just the availability of those funds. If we have a project, we have to fund, and we just don't have those funds available.
So yeah, if you go into a bond fund or a or T-bill fund, you would pay a premium to take it out if you needed to, or?
So it would depend on the market condition at the time. If you had a highly valuable treasury bond or CD, we could sell it on the secondary market for a possible surplus. But again, if the market goes the other way again, then you would be possibly losing money on the sale of that asset as well. So we do have the ability to liquidate any of the long-term assets as well.
Okay.
Yep.
And just, like, again, the U.S. Treasury bonds, I mean, is this trend will stay consistent, I suspect, that they'll always be below the Brevera Wealth deposit fund?
So right now, post-pandemic, money markets have been higher than your longer term. What it's supposed to be is the more time you give someone, the better your rate's supposed to be.
Right.
The 30-year, the 10-year, the 5-year, they're supposed to be benefiting you by giving up more of your time. But with the knowledge that the Fed is going to be dropping rates, that's where you're seeing people at that 5-year rate are hoping that they're not losing money at that 5-year rate. They're anticipating the rate going to be around that mark in 5 years. So in 5 years, the money market will more than likely be less than the long-term options. But it's unknown at what time that time frame will happen.
Okay. Any other thoughts, questions this morning? Okay.
I mean, yeah, again, it was prompted by a question of what are some other options. I mean, again, I think my opinion is that we stay the course for now at least. And the other part of this is that, we're a board. Managing this type of portfolio gets to be some time consuming, and I want to make sure we are able to do that as board members without being too burdensome. So
Sure. And we can simplify it too if you wanted to do a 1 3-year and 1 5-year or any number of things. We can be very flexible.
Okay.
And we can always present back again if requested to present.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thanks, Titus.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Everybody kind of consensus at this point, but just keep going with the Brevera Wealth Fund, and
I think
means
so.
we're getting that 4+%. Okay. All right. Okay. Anything else, Dennis?
no.
Nope. Okay. Thank you. All right, we can move on to item 7 this morning, drainage permits, complaints, and issues. Manager Jones, any updates on?
Well,
River
Mr.
Road?
Koch is back again,
Okay.
and quite frankly, I think he's just looking for our opinion, as the board has made the decision that his problem is one that is self-inflicted. I talked briefly to Michael about it, and the culvert situation was put there to lessen the drainage program many moons ago, if I could recall correctly. So at this point, all we can do is advise him to find his own engineer and take the steps. We're really not involved in the situation.
Okay.
Yeah, based on the conversation with Manager Jones, I think the end run after we kind of finish our analysis, and Casey, Nick's going to call you relative to the culverts within that subdivision. Apparently Greg doesn't have them, but we'll have a conversation on that. Once we can tie some things down, the thought process is to give Mr. Cook and say, if you wanted to create a special assessment district to facilitate the process, here's the information, here's the background. Likely, and this is a recommendation that's off, it's not formalized yet, but if you want to get a petition and get signatures, then you can bring it forward to the board and the board might deal with it. Because otherwise, that simplifies the amount of effort that the board's putting into it, and it puts it back on the landowners to actually come in for a solution. The other aspect you may want to consider, you've never bonded a project before for the preliminary engineering report and the vote. That's an opportunity to think at with this one. So you're basically putting it back in the landowner's position to solve it rather than the board trying to come into a situation and resolve it on their behalf. So those are the things that are kind of under consideration and thought process, so.
But the bond would protect the board.
The bond basically would be to cover the cost of preliminary engineering report to take it forward. So in other words, the county's not sitting and absorbing the cost of a more of a local issue. I'm somewhat wondering, and I do not have data, so I cautiously mention this. There's a number of areas in the county where groundwater has become an issue. And I'm wondering whether, being as how that's kind of a gravel pit area, that even though we have the impact from the commercial industrial area that's been developed, how much of that may be attributable to, just a groundwater situation. Don't have data, did not look for well scenarios out there, trying not to go too deep into the weeds. But I see that as a potential factor in what's going on out there. So, but we'll continue to look at the special assessment district option and prepare a brief letter, a memorandum to him from the board to say, here's your option if you want to carry it forward. His only other option, and he's talked about it, he mentioned it to me, was to, take legal action against those properties, and that's entirely up to him. But the only option from the district's perspective would be for a special assessment district, but I think in this particular case, you leave it to him to bring it forward rather than the district pursuing anything on its own.
And this property is outside the city limits,
It's in the
but
extraterritorial.
it's in the ETA.
Yeah, it's in the ETA.
Yeah.
And, from that context, all of the development out there occurred before, or the platting and majority of the development occurred before the stormwater management plans were in place, or the requirements were in place. So,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, who was that?
Mike Cook.
Okay.
Yeah, item D on our list here. Okay. Any other questions?
I will touch on another one here. Chuck, you and I visited. Nick has been in and out of the office a lot, but I can tell you what we've come up with on the hawk tree based on the evaluation of all the data and the chronology. We don't see any jurisdictional issue from the Water Resource District in that area based on the context of how the property was developed and how everything came into place. At one point in time, we were talking about they put the culverts too high, and the culverts being high were actually acting as an obstruction. Well, it appears based on the data we have, we'll take a closer look and refine that, is that the roadway ditch was actually constructed at the wrong grade or whatever, and what it amounted to is they just put the culverts in where the road grade was at. So there's nothing that the landowners have done relative to an obstruction. So in a roundabout way, and I need to research this a little further and talk to Nick, is that the original stormwater management plan was approved by the city of Bismarck, but they're really, the oversight issue of how it got constructed likely didn't take place, and then there's some extraneous issues that we want to refine. But I don't see any jurisdictional issue, but the board's context was, let's, put our arms around it and come back with a findings, recommendations, or findings, conclusions, and recommendation statement relative to what's going on out there. And I'll visit with you more on that, Chuck. I just had a brief conversation with Nick in the last couple days, so. Speaking of Nick, and I don't know that it's on here, but I will touch on it real quick.
So, before we move on
yeah.
to that one, so in this hawk tree situation, for us as a board and for our district, if there was a natural water course that was being obstructed,
Correct.
that's where we would get involved. And
Right.
you're saying that's not the case.
That's not the case. And in this case, it was an artificial water course that was created, or was supposed to have been created as part of the stormwater management plan, which puts it in the same pretense.
Right.
If that was obstructed, you'd have authority.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Thank you. You had something else?
Yeah, I guess it's really under old business, but being as how I was talking about Nick. Nick was out yesterday with Mitch and Tom Burney with FEMA to do the CAV for Burleigh County. They went through, Mitch is with them now. They're still doing stuff for the next 2 or 3 days.
Okay.
But Nick went through all the processing and paperwork and elevation certificates to determine what was done in the past several years and the compliance with that. And they did come across a number of things, which you typically do on an audit perspective. So that's going well, and that process is moving forward, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Any updates on the keelboat part?
Just the standpoint that I need to finish writing the memorandum. As far as the city's going with the plat, everything is taken care of for access.
We're
It's
not
just
holding anything up on their.
not holding anything up. The only thing that they're looking at, they want us to research and provide them documentation, which I have. I just haven't got the memo together, was the actual O&M component for that site. So, and like I said, I've got the documentations, I just need to do the write-up
Okay.
and share it with them, okay?
Kind of do this in reverse order, but then finally the River Road there, is there any updates on that one? Was that?
It's on the list.
Okay.
See,
Sounds good.
we're trying to avoid it, just know.
All right. Okay. Any other questions on drainage permits and complaints? All right. We can move on to projects this morning. I doubt there's much of an update regarding the Hogue Island. I do know we did send a letter to the one landowner regarding,
Right.
yeah.
And then I was jotting some notes down here. From the easement side, obviously, there's not a critical, you have easements out there, so it's just a revision of the easements. Those easements, just to give you a background, the revisions would be an update of the existing language, which Dave and I'll have to go over, because obviously it's dated from the 70s.
Yep.
So we modernize it, if you want to call it that. Description of the revised location of the easement as a lot exhibit. And we would fix it rather than having it being movable from the top of bank, so that we don't have it change should situations exist. And then the O&M provisions as they've been stated in the special assessment district. So those are the components of what that revised easement will look at, and Dave and I'll just have to work through. And it's going to be the same for everybody, language-wise, so it's just a template to be reviewed by the board and then presented to the owners. I will say that if any one of the individual owners chooses not to sign, which they do have the opportunity to do, obviously, because it's a requested easement from the board would just retain the existing easement.
Okay.
So,
All right. Thanks, Michael. Any questions?
Just, I was just thinking out loud here as you're talking about it, you'd make that easement a more of a permanent easement, so it's not tied to top of bank.
Correct.
Location, but the people upstream, downstream, that would be different.
yes, that would be the existing easement as it sets out there today.
And so I'm just, thinking aloud. I totally agree with that approach. I just was wondering if that's going to be a discontinuity in the future, and nothing to do about it. I think this makes it better. I
Right.
like it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Apple Creek slide.
Basically, update on that one, the Bar Engineering has gotten their initial drilling started for their inclinometers to measure whether things are still moving or not, so that's going in. They did install their drainage system. There's been some concerns on our side from Braun looking at their drainage system, as it's not keeping up with the water that's coming out of the hill. It might just be a timing thing. It has to be there a while for it to catch up, so they're monitoring that and watching what's going on. We did have a request by DES to come up and submit what they call a UEI number. It's a unique identity information. I've got Sean in my office working on that, and Wendy, they're going back and forth. There's a number of items in that. I mean, it's a lengthy list. It used to be the Dunn number, or Dun and Bradstreet. Interestingly enough, you go to the Dun and Bradstreet site, the only thing you can find is the number. So the information that's attached to it isn't there, but we'll be stepping through that because that's necessary for you to request reimbursement under the contracts. So the contracts are back to DES, and as soon as we get that information together and submitted and we get a number, we'll turn that around and do the first reimbursement, which should be the next month, so.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions on the Apple Creek slide?
And I will say, I should add this, that Braun has got their sites located out there, and they're planning on doing their drilling for their inclinometers and monitoring equipment as well. We did mention at the last board meeting about getting a survey for some of the locations and stuff out there, and it sounds like they may have been able to rectify some of the concerns they had themselves. So they may or may not need that, so it's just on hold for now.
Okay. There was a pay request that kind of came in that, I'm not sure, did they all get resolved?
There's several, yeah, and that's one of the
Bills.
things, based on Special Authorization 30, the Water Resource District has sent the bills from Braun and BGC, and they're paid directly by the Water Resource District. Apparently, they're mailing them to you, James, and they're not necessarily getting to Wendy. So we've kind of worked on that in the background to make sure that they get to Wendy, or actually get to us first for authorization to payment so that Wendy can process them. Yep.
They are in the bills, the two
Yep.
that I have.
Okay. Yep. Good, thank you.
But yeah, that was a processing site on bronze primarily, so
Yep.
I think we've resolved that now.
Okay. All right. If nothing else on the projects, we can move on to other old business this morning. Item A there, Crystal Springs Watershed Initiative. I think Michael has a presentation he wants to provide us this morning to give us some more background information. I think there was some correspondence going back and forth, I think, between Burleigh County and a few other folks, just kind of wondering and we just kind of wanted to get an update on where this project's at and maybe discuss a little bit more as a board. I don't think we've ever really come up with a consensus on where this project's going.
Okay, it's interesting because I'm coming from over there, I'm going over here, and I'll wear a separate hat. The Crystal Springs Watershed Initiative, I think you can get it up on the screen maybe. Let's try this.
Is that Tahoe?
Looks like
It is Tahoe.
Beautiful trees.
Oh, that way, I got you. Thank you. Wonderful electronics. The thing is, it's this way. Okay, and I don't have it on my screen, but I have it on there so I can at least see what I'm doing. Crystal Springs Watershed Initiative is, in essence, a water removal project for the Crystal Springs area along Interstate 94 that affects BNSF and the interstate. So here's kind of this presentation is a summary of what was presented to the Stutsman County Water Resource District for the feasibility study. And kind of the theme of the whole process is what are we here to solve? In other words, defining the issue to start with, and the removal of accumulated and excess floodwaters. And the motto that we've kind of taken, it's time to remove water versus dirt. Because everybody, the railroad's trying to raise their grade, the highway's trying to raise its grade, and they raised it 10 feet back in 2010. The railroad ultimately, interestingly enough, has raised their grade by 28 feet total since way back when. And we've got the Bible camp and township roadways and stuff that are underwater. There are also recreational lake cabins out there and ag lands. There's about 600 acres plus of water or ag lands that are underwater, not from the low level, but from more recent conditions.
Just for context, you're on the interstate, I think, is it just east of
Just east of the city is Crystal Springs.
Crystal Springs, and it goes down that, and there's that rest area?
Yep.
And they just, every year you go by there, it seems that they keep raising that embankment, and you got the rail line over there, but anyway.
Yeah, like I said, when they raised it last time, the DOT did a report in 2010. Yeah, it's 2008 or 2010, and basically decided, we're done raising it and raising it and raising it and raising it. We're going to raise it once and hopefully get by for a while. And so they raised it 10 feet, and we'll show you where the trend line's going. Interestingly enough, historic lake elevations. I'll go back here once. If it will go back. I'll go back to here. This is a preferred alternative. You can see the highway interstate's kind of fuzzy, goes kind of right through the middle down here. This is where the Bible camp is at, way over on the right-hand side. There'd be a pump station, and it'd be about 8,300 lineal feet of pipe that would go in, or 83,000, excuse me. Thank you. And we'd be dropping it into a tributary to the north of the Long Lake Refuge. And the Long Lake Refuge goes down in through Burleigh County, and it goes to Long Lake Creek, which goes to Mackenzie Slough, which goes to Apple Creek, which goes to the Missouri River. So this is just kind of a profile of that system. It's really kind of odd, to your point of thousands versus tens of thousands of feet. This is really spiky, but if you stretch this out, it's really pretty flat ground. You can see along here there's a number of irrigation systems. This will be a 30-inch pipeline with a capacity of about 20 CFS. Now, we've set the capacity based on the projected inflow over the past 14 years and the period of record and what we've seen. Water levels in the lake have gone up routinely in about 7/10 of a foot per year. This last year, they went up 2 feet. This is the first year in a long time they actually started falling off a little bit because of evaporation, and I'll show some information on that here in a little bit. This is the alignment. We actually looked at 5 different alignments, one going to the Cheyenne River, one going the James River, one going south, and obviously they get longer and longer and more expensive. This is the least expensive one, and it also takes it to the natural watershed outlet, which was the Missouri River. But it takes about another 40 feet of elevation on the current water level before you actually get overflow. Well, you can imagine where the camp's going to be and everything else. Now, arguably, that watershed, is it going to fill to that point? It may not get to the fill point, but obviously you've got infrastructure that's affected in the next, 3 to 5 feet of elevation significantly. So as you can see here from a regulatory place on the alignment, we're not ending up with any major issues as far as wetlands or anything else because we're going through ag property. Again, this is a pipeline-based scenario, so we're not going to have any open ditches. The only open ditch would go from the tributary here, which would go kind of southwest through Lake Etta, and then into the Long Lake Refuge. So that being said, we took a careful look at the watershed. The initial watershed was, like 250 square miles, and then when we started looking at it, it's much smaller than that. When we did the spill analysis using basically the ND-RAM HEC-RAS model that the states developed, we came out with, there's only about 25.8 square miles of actually contributing watershed. I always look at it's an illustration that's kind of like an ice cube tray. You fill the lower portion of the ice cube tray, and they all spill to the ones down below. Well, the ones up above are not spilling, but they're leaking down below, and the groundwater is coming up on the other side, and I'll show you where that's at in a little bit. The one to the right here is, a larger analysis. If we had multiple rainfalls on top of one another, eventually it would spill and we'd have a larger watershed, but that's not what's occurring out there. Here's the lake system. You can see the camp. Let's see, right. The camp is right in here. You've got the railroad through here. The railroad spends about $3.5 million every time they do a grade raise from an expense standpoint. They raised it 24, well, they're trying to raise it 2 feet. They actually raised it 20 inches this last time. And within a year, it was almost back to where they had water on the ties again. So that's a big expense. The highway out here obviously is higher. And just some general elevations as far as the interstate's upwards of 62. Right now we've got an elevation in the lake of about 54. But in 2033, and I'll show that in a little bit, the interstate's going to have to think about raising their grade again. So it's just a matter of time.
That 62 for the interstate, that's the lowest elevation?
That's the lowest elevation. Right now, if they hadn't raised it, the water would be about, I think, 2 feet over the top of the interstate. And as you'll notice, if you go further east, they did their grade raise by Cleveland, and it's the same scenario there as far as the increase in water levels that are occurring. And the DOT out there, just background, is actually planning on building the foundation so they can raise that grade significantly. Don't quote me, I think it's like 14 to 16 feet. But they're not doing it because of dollars and funding. So they'll build a base and then go from there. DOT, the steering committee for this has been Kidder County, Stutzman County, DOT, BNSF. So everybody's involved as far as the players here, including the camp, as far as discussion as to what this means and where it's going to go and how it might actually be funded. These are just some existing culverts. Initially, we looked at trying to lower everything, bring it back down to a more nominal level. And then after the water level keeps coming up, the decision was, okay, let's lower it to where everybody's currently protected. Everybody's protected themselves to about 1750. So that's the target removal. We could lower it more, but why lower it more? You're just spending money to take water out when you don't have any infrastructure at risk. That 1750 also gives enough freeboard or protection for several large years of events, because this pumping is going to occur over a 180-day period. So we would pump long-term, smaller pipe, smaller pump system to kind of optimize that as well as for costs. So just as background, Stink Lake is the one. Let me go back here one slide. Stink Lake is the big one that's right in the middle here. That's the one that It was the lowest one in the system, it had the poorest water quality, and it's where everything came to, and then everything came up from there. So when we went back and looked historically at all the different lake systems based on aerial imagery, back in 1957, Stink Lake was about 32. Now, 2024, it's at 53, or like I said, about 54 right now. So when we looked at, that's a 21-foot rise. When I remember talking about the railroad raised their grade about 28 feet, that's where that comes from. Through that whole area, they actually realigned and straightened the railroad at one point in time historically to try and hit some high ground in between to avoid the grade raises. So overflow to the Missouri River is 1801, so it's about 47 feet.
See, Michael, in the late 80s, early 90s, when the drought was kind of coming through this area, did we get any did it drop a little bit there too?
There was a little bit of a shift back in Crystal Lake and South Stink Lake. There was a drop in about 2010. But then we had 2011 and the major inflows across the state, and everything jumped up.
Yeah. Okay.
What we found here, interestingly, in the process, I'll show you. It's touchy. This is the trend line based on the data. And this is the same thing that DOT did for Cleveland. So we've had the conversation with DOT based on this, and hopefully they will, participate in the next stage of the preliminary engineering report, which is the feasibility studies are done. So the preliminary engineering report would be the next phase. But here's the projected timeline of where it's at. You will note that the railroad is probably going to have to raise their grade at least once before construction begins, if not twice. So they're going to spend between $3 and $6 million just, pardon the expression, stay above water during the period of time when we get the regulatory approval and actually build a pipeline, assuming that all the partners step up and have it. The Bible camp, basically, in about 2036, the main structures are going to be, they'd have to be moved by then. So if nothing happens within the next 2 to 3 years, they're going to look at their options as far as relocating. They do have property that they relocate to, but again, it's still within the basin, and who knows where you build an $11 million facility and the waters keep coming up. We don't know the long-term trend, decades from now, but the scenario is trying to capture it at this point in time. And then, like I said, the Interstate 94, about that 2023 gives them about a 2-year lead time for, construction plan sets and everything else. Since they've done it out there before, they probably can turn things around fairly quickly. But interestingly enough, somebody was telling me that they're actually borrowing material relatively close to the facility, and then they started realizing that we're borrowing material and the groundwater is showing up. And I'll show you a little bit of that scenario in a little bit. So their borrow sites tend to be limited because of the groundwater that's in this area. Now, from a historic record, just on area capacity curves from 2010 to 24, we have about 22,000 acre feet that were in the system. However, when you go out and you do the aerial storage increases and other stuff, you come up with about 42,000 acre feet. Again, you got all the area capacity curve, we got all the lakes at the same level. But when you notice the other one, Stink Lake, was considerably lower, there's a lot more storage, a lot more water that occurred in that to get it to that level. So your average per year is about 3,000 acre feet. If you were to do a trend line and say, okay, we're going to take out 3,000 acre feet on an annual basis, we'd be able to keep up, but there are some years that are more. In 2025, the inflow was estimated at about 7,900 acre feet. So from a design perspective, we're not looking at taking out the peak. We're just looking at getting water out and then managing the storage. In other words, letting it fill up, taking it back out. Kind of like a dam scenario, if you will, from a management perspective.
Michael, the target elevation that says here is 1746?
Target elevation at this point was 1750.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yes.
Okay.
On which lake?
Well, on the entire system. They're all completely at the same elevation now. We had the DWR go in and set in present stations, and you'll notice with wind and changes and inflows from different directions, they're slightly different, but basically they're all connected now. They're all at one elevation.
And where's your pump station?
Pump station will be on Stink Lake.
And where's that from that rest area?
That's just to the north of the rest area. Now, from that perspective, the decision to go to Stink Lake was made from several reasons. The best water quality out there is in Crystal Springs Lake. Because if you realize Crystal Springs, there's an old fountain there. That's where the trailblazers and wagon trains used to come through, and that's where they filled their water buckets, or filled their water as they continued west. So there's a historic fountain that's out there, well, if you will, as to where the water was taken for that. Stink Lake, just think about the name itself, give you an indication of what it was. The one guy said back in the 30s and 40s, they hated and walked across it because it was dry, and it basically had an aroma to it. So that water quality in that system is less, or was less. It's fairly consistent right now, but it was less than the other portions of the lake systems. And Lake Burleigh obviously has filled up, and there's a recreation area that's built out there now, and their concern is they don't want to take the water level down because they lose their lake. They're really not going to lose their lake because we're going to an elevation that goes back to when the development was first created. So that's why we didn't take out, or not looking at taking out any water below 1750 at this point.
Are they part of the assessment district?
Well, currently there is no assessment district. Would they be, could they be? Yes. And here's the conflicting scenario. Neither Stutsman County Commission nor the Water Resource District can assess the railroad under a special assessment district. You also can't assess DOT. And there is the ability to assess the county for roadways. It's been done, but it's somewhat infrequent. So this project is probably going to end up being a partnership between the parties and say, who's going to be stepping up, because we're looking at about $250,000 a year for operating just for pumping water out. Somebody's got to pay that, and how that gets processed is all going to wrap around. So even if you remove it at 15 CFS, I got the number down there, it'd be about 4 years to get rid of the water that's there today to get down to what we would consider an operating level.
But that's getting down to that 1746 it's showing.
In that one, yes.
Probably less if you went to 1750.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then the next
So-
page, I think you have the.
Yeah, the next page, like I
Yeah,
said, we're
1750.
basically analyzing different options
Yep.
as we're going through here. So here's the interesting one, when you look at the removal to the structured impact areas, which is to 1750, at a 20 CFS system. Now, functionally, depending upon the rainfall and runoff and groundwater inflow, you're not necessarily going to have a 20 CFS every day, all day for 180 days. It's going to be some operational period during that year to get it down. But you're still looking at 1.9, or basically 2 to 3 years. The reason we're talking 2 to 3 years is we took a close look at Lake Burleigh, which is above Stink Lake, and said, is there ability to hold water in there? Because the impact areas are on the highway and the BNSF. So we're looking at holding water in Lake Burleigh as a surge pond initially, so that we don't have to pump that water out and we can lower the waters in the impact area sooner. And that basically gains us a year in that process.
So what's the natural overflow elevation from Burleigh now to 15?
The natural overflow elevation from Burleigh is 1846.
46.
It's 44. County Highway 39 has a culvert in it that was put in at 46, so it's 2 feet above that.
1844 or 17?
1746 and 1744. There was discussion that the culvert under County 39 was an obstruction because it's holding water 2 feet higher than it would had that culvert been at the level of the natural overflow. So there's discussions of, if we're taking water out, are we going to be required to lower it below that, or were there going to be easements around the lake? Majority of the residents out there with the cabins don't want the water lowered. Well, obviously you can lower it some, but they don't want to lose their lake. It's a great fishery right now. In fact, I think Game and Fish just built another ramp going out there so that people can get in there. But from the scenario period of record, I'll take you to the lower left here. The numbers you've seen before, the 42,000 acre feet, direct rainfall and precipitation over that same period was 60,000 acre feet. Evaporation based on the North Dakota Hydrology Manual is about 100,000 acre feet. So net at that point in time, you should have had a 9,000 acre feet reduction. There isn't. We actually have 42,000 acre feet of additional water in that system, which means the groundwater component is about 34% of the total inflow of the lake, which is a lot.
Yeah, that's
A lot more than we ever expected initially. We thought the watershed was driving it, to be honest with you, on first look, and it's kind of like, that's not what's going on. So, that being said, we've got surface acres and of course evaporation and everything else, so we have a lot of water to take off. Funding opportunities, I'll show a little bit on the groundwater component a little bit. Funding opportunities, the opinion of probable cost of this system is about $24.6 million. Looking at HMGP grant as well as the DWR grant. In talking to, and this has actually changed since the conversations with DES. DES has HMGP funds, but probably limited to, not unlike the Apple Creek scenario, probably about $200,000. So this will be a combined application for funding for the preliminary engineering report through the HMGP as well as DWR funding. So ultimately, the preliminary engineering report for this is about $976,000. Stutzman County is looking at that funding opportunity, giving money to the their water resource district in Mills to actually, participate in this. And of course, it's the participation share that matters. It's about, if I remember the number through DWR alone, it would be about a 63% cost share between the dual grants. Now, obviously, we have participation people or participation groups. BNSF did participate in the feasibility study. That can't participate in the feasibility study. DOT did not. So there's going to be a request to all those entities to participate to basically spread the costs amongst the beneficiaries. Again, it's interesting to Roger's point, we do not have a special assessment district. And if you created a special assessment district, you can't assess the people that benefit. So there's going to have to be a discussion between the parties and have an agreement that, who's going to pay what portion of the final project cost. And that's going to happen in the stage of the preliminary engineering report.
Hey, Mike, I see on Google Earth there's a couple of waterfall production areas, and there's others in the periphery. Any discussions with those groups yet on what they
Yes.
would think about removing
We had,
water?
and I'll go back to this one, the WPAs and WMAs are south of the interstate.
There's one, the Crystal Springs waterfall
Right.
production area, and then there's one to the northeast as well.
Right.
Hagland.
We've had discussion with the Fish and Wildlife Service just in general, not the specifics until we get into the regulatory side. Obviously, when they purchased those properties, they had a lot more open ground than they do now. They have water instead. One of the ones we looked at on the southern portion of this is that we're not changing any of the culverts and the cross connections. So even though we're taking water off, we're not taking water below what would have normally been there with the culverts installed. So from that perspective, but we will have to have a conversation with them relative to the impact of their management areas. We have had the conversation with the Long Lake Refuge, which I'll talk about in a little bit, that as long as the water quality is better than what they have in the refuge, then their general consensus was that they didn't have any major concerns. Now, that's not to say that's going to change when you start having one-on-one discussions of actually what's going to be happening. But, and to your point, Dennis, that's one of the things on the routing standpoint. Here, going back to you can see the WMAs and the other facilities there, their ownerships that are out here. Mm-hmm. So we also did have a conversation with North Dakota Game and Fish relative to the fisheries. And they gave us some indications as to what water levels that they would prefer on Crystal Springs and Stink Lake to maintain the fishery. So even though we have infrastructure impacts, which are the huge dollar amounts from an environmental perspective, as long as we can not have the impact of the infrastructure, we certainly should be able to maintain those environmental values as well. Okay. Let me go to...
And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and specifically Long Lake National Wildlife Refuge, so, because it will go into that northeast end of Long Lake?
Right, it goes into Lake Etta, and I'll show you that in a little bit. It goes into Lake Etta, and then it goes into the refuge, and then it goes from the refuge into Long Lake Creek, which heads to McKenzie Slough. And that's where, if you want to look at this, that's where Burleigh County becomes involved, because the water's coming your way,
Yep.
or our
Just on
way.
the west side of Tappan, between Tappan and Dawson.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, they've had botulism issues there on the west end. That's where, it's a unique lake because the main inlet comes in from the south and then, very far downstream, and then the outlet's right by the inlet. And so
Right.
the water has to back up, and if they have botulism problems, when they have those issues, they lose thousands of ducks. And so, getting fresh water there, is that something they're looking at as a benefit?
They're actually, in the initial conversations, they said as long as the water quality was better coming in from that side than what was in the system, it would be a benefit to them.
Sure.
Now, in 2015, get my dates correct, in 2015, they replaced the gate structures, because there's a system that goes north towards Lake Etta. They replaced those wooden gate structures with metal ones. And I've got a full plan set of that. In fact, the Water Resource District back in 2015 was open to comment on it, but all they were doing is replacing the existing system, so there really was nothing to comment on. They have had issues of reconstructing some things and trying to raise the water level in there, because if they have a higher water level, they've got less botulism issues. And there are some concerns that I've noted out there that at some point in time we'll have a conversation with them. The outlet itself is actually in Burleigh County, the outlet structure. The rest is in Kidder County. So here's kind of the BC ratio, and I know this is going to go higher. BNSF grade raises, I just took a 10-year window. I think on our planning scenario, the window of benefits will be more towards the life cycle of the project, probably the 20 to 25 years. But we had to come up with a number to start with from a feasibility perspective. So you're looking at, $10.5 million in grade raises, Bible camp relocations, 9 to 11 million. Single DOT grade raise in 22 when they did it was 16.5 million. And obviously, as you go up, the more you go up, the more you go out, the more material that's necessary. So there's going to be a lot more, cost there. 500 to 600 acres of ag land. We just valued the land and property because it's out of production. It's just not there. If you had to buy it, we just put a number down. County roadways are about 4.3 million per mile to raise them with a 2-foot grade raise. That's about 8.6 million. One of the larger ones that we do not have a number for, and we'll have to visit with BNSF to refine this, is their interstate commerce. BNSF, there's discussion that they lose $1 million a day when that rail is closed. And it's closed during the grade raises. They're trying to do things in the evening, at night, and everything else. So there's a significant loss there. So the benefit cost ratio is probably significantly higher than the 1.9. But in a feasibility study, the question is it feasible? The answer is yes. Again, I just got some of the grade elevations and information on the background here that we were from before. Here's the discharge, and this kind of where it goes, where if you want to talk about the impacts or potential impacts down to Burleigh County. We will be discharging into this tributary that goes through the highway, goes through Old Highway 10, goes through the interstate, goes through the railroad. Dawson Hook is what it's called. There's 4 culverts there. And then it gets into the Lake Etta system. And when Whispering Stream is basically the upstream edge of the Long Lake Refuge. Okay? So what we did in Kidder County was basically doing like everybody else and throwing up their hands and say, hey, we don't want any more water. We have enough water problems. What are we going to do with your additional water? So the discussion is, what is the impact of discharging that water? From a regulatory standpoint, this will be a statewide or inter-district significance permit because we're having 2 water resource districts involved. What Stutzman County basically has told Kidder County, both in letter and in meetings, is that whatever improvements are necessary along this tributary and stream to accommodate the project waters are all going to be a cost to the project. They're not a cost to Kidder County. There are current issues along this stream with cattails and some culvert installations that need to be upgraded. Those would be upgraded as well as part of the project. So Cater County would not have a cost other than the participation and involvement in the process and making sure that their needs are accommodated. We believe that the 180-day pumping timeline window is going to require easements along this corridor. It's kind of hard to maybe get an easement within Lake Edda because, you know, what kind of water level change. So what we did, we took the HEC-RAS analysis and we went through and took a look at the stream from the upstream side all the way down to Whispering Stream, excuse me. And we found very little change in water surface elevation and this was done at 15 CFS because we're still earlier in the process. We found very little change on the 15 CFS being added to the system. And when we added it to the system, we added it on top of a stream crossing standards design event. So we said, okay, I mean, obviously 15 CFS in the tributary is not going to be an awful lot of water. It's not going to be very deep. Obviously because the cattails, it's moving through pretty slow, but there's really no impact. So when we looked at the stream crossings, here's the net effect that we had with no improvements. Starting at Highway 10, these are in inches. We had 35th Avenue, the greatest increase was about 13.4 inches, and that was the, you know, the additional head or the additional height of water behind that culvert system at that street. So what we did then is we said, okay, if we put in, first of all, let me back up. All of those stream crossings meet the stream crossing standards, even with the additional flow that we would add. So we're not violating the stream crossing standards by adding project water. The one that failed was actually the railroad. The railroad's culvert was putting back in 1960s, and they need more to even meet their system standards. So they would have a 42-inch steel pipe. That would, again, improve that system to be able to move water faster through the system.
Is the stream crossing compliance tied to a design frequency?
Yes. Based on the, whether it's the interstate, which would be 100-year, counties would be 15-year, township 25, depending upon the actual crossing location and the classification for the roadway.
So that's what you mean by compliance?
Yep. So what the context that the recommendation to the Stutzman County Commission for the project is that you insert or put in additional capacity at each one of these crossings to accommodate the additional water to not have that additional rise in water surface elevation at those locations. Are you going to have flow in the stream? Yes. Are you going to have extended duration of flow in the stream? Yes. But as long as you're within compliance, you should be within the confines of the tributary itself. Again, we'll probably have to get easements just because of the duration, not necessarily from a flood scenario. If you put 3 inches on either side of the stream and know that the stream goes up, you know, the impact area from a footprint is relatively small. There are concerns relative to adding water on top of a stream that already has groundwater issues. This one actually probably has inflows from groundwater. That's why it's constantly wet. So there are some things we'll look at further when we get into the preliminary design side. The Stutzman County Commission in the preliminary engineering report, one of the recommendations for scoping is that this is one of the first things that gets discussed with Kidder County so that Kidder County knows what's going on before we go into the full-blown design of the rest of the system. And we do have meetings set up with the commission to talk about that.
Is there an opportunity for all the counties involved to get together and have a discussion openly and publicly?
There always is. In fact, we've offered Stutzman County will have a public informational meeting that will occur once the feasibility report is done. The same has been offered to Cater County. So as far as Burleigh County goes, let me talk to this one for a second. Going from that, here's the scenario. We went back to DWR and got additional funding to look at the groundwater component because of its impact. The DWR went out and flew the area. They have their AEM study, which is basically they're doing a groundwater analysis for gravels and sands and trying to find out exactly where the aquifers are and where the water is. And based on that analysis, you can see here the Crystal Springs Lake system is right here. Yep. Crystal Springs is here. It goes back over here. The groundwater, and it actually covered it up here, The water surface in the lake is 1755. The groundwater around the lake is 1775 to 1800. So you have this constant flow of groundwater moving through the system over a period of, years, and it's showing up in the lake. And when you look at the 2011 event, you look at the 2019 event, and if you're looking at rainfall data as well as runoff, that water's in the system and it's coming. So the projection, we are now projecting about a 0.6 of a foot rise per year in the lake elevation. How long that's going to last, I mean, obviously it's somewhat.
So do you have a feel for lag time?
We're looking at that right now. That's one of the things that our groundwater people are looking at to try and figure out what that might be. Again, we could do we're in the feasibility level, so we're flying pretty high. Once they look at it, they may say that, hey, in the preliminary engineering report, we might want to look at this in a little more detail. But right now, it's pretty rudimentary. But you can obviously see that we got a significant groundwater component going on out here. There's been a lot of discussion, kind of a little bit of a squirrel here, been a lot of discussion, said, well, let's just irrigate out of the lake. Well, you can irrigate out of the lake, but you use it for consumptive use. You have a little bit of evaporation, but the rest of it just goes back into groundwater, goes back in the lake.
Yeah.
And you can't implement that in any reasonable timeline, because if you got to irrigate 10,000 acres, well, good luck getting enough people signed up. You can't do it in a reasonable timeline to have a manageable effect on lake elevation. Now, what has been happening out here is that because of the AEM data, the landowners out there who are choosing to irrigate now know where to look to put their well systems. Because you basically have an underground map of where the aquifers are and where the best well systems would be. Kind of going down to the Long Lake system, the control elevation at Long Lake, and of course you see way over here the road going south. This is the outfall structure that's in Burleigh County. That is basically at 1713.5. It's been raised 18 inches with rock. There's rock in the structure. I'm not sure that it's permitted rock. That's a question that's out there. But obviously they've done that. Approximate acres is about 17,000 acres. That's what's reported in the water permit. We went through and validated that with the LiDAR analysis of the area.
That's the current?
That's the total acreage within the refuge, the body of water,
Oh, the
based on that
refuge
elevation.
itself.
The
So not
refuge
the
itself.
lake, not the water surface.
Well, that's the water surface at the control elevation. Now, Lake Etta is a separate system. That's actually upstream slightly, and there's more acreage in there. So what we're looking at, the total annual Crystal Lake inflow from the system is about 3,200 acre feet, assuming that, you're pumping 180 days at 20 CFS. That would be a 2-inch rise in that lake on the refuge in 180 days. But if you take that 2 inches and divide it by 180, there's really not much of a rise in the lake system. So if you're talking about peripheral impacts around the lake, you're probably not even going to be able to measure it or see it.
Or is there any part of that lake that's on private land, or is it all public?
That is an interesting question, because we did take a look at that. I don't know if I've got that map. I don't have that map in here. The refuge does have refuge land, and it has easement land. And if you take the refuge land and the easement land, there are areas around the lake that are not on an easement and not on the refuge, at least according to their GIS system. So there are private lands that are not under easement or control of the Fish and Wildlife Service at this point. How that manages for, how they manage their system and raise it, and whether they're creating flooding impacts on other properties, that's secondary to the project question.
It's
But
almost assuredly grazing land.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
probably non-contentious.
Right. Yeah, most of the land around the lake itself is grassland.
Yeah.
But there are properties that are not part of the easement and refuge system.
And it's gotta be a pretty small amount, we're probably not talking.
Yeah, no, I don't, we've not tabulated it, but they're like, I could point out a couple areas that I know, but, yeah, they're not extensive areas. But there are areas that, based on the easement boundaries, and we don't know for sure, obviously not having done title search, there may be easements that aren't shown on the GIS mapping. So, again, those are conversations to be had once the project goes forward. Kidder County has expressed some concerns relative to the refuge and how it's managed. I've been down there and taken a look at some of the way, what they're doing, and I'm questioning it, but in all reality, they probably have a management plan, they're probably following it. You know, so from that perspective, I can't second guess from the outside, just looking at what's physically going on, so.
Michael, explain how you got to the 3,200 acre feet annual Crystal Lake inflow. I'm not following the math there.
Okay, let's go back to,
Is that, you're saying that's the volume that would eventually get to Long Lake? So we as a district need to understand that as far as the impact potentially to Long Lake and its
Right.
residents, things of that nature, but.
right,
15 CFS over 180 days, that's the calculation, 2
Yeah.
CFS
Right.
days.
But isn't it 2 acre feet a day per CFS?
yeah,
So that would be like 7,000 then.
right, but we're not necessarily pumping the full 180,
Yeah, it's
depending
180
upon.
days.
No, yeah, but that's, if you take 2 times 4, or 2 times 20, that's 40.
Right.
40 times 180 is 7,000.
Gotcha.
That's what I'm just trying to
Right.
understand how you get to that number.
The scenario we have is the ability to pump plus the average flow. And what we did, I'll go back to this one, the operational removal on a annual basis is roughly 3,000, just a little over 3,000 acre feet per day, per year.
Which page is that on?
I don't have a page number.
Okay, there it is, yeah.
But anyway, so that's where it came down to, that's the amount of water that we'd be taking out.
Okay.
And again, the one thing we talked with Kidder County as well is that, you know, if there's a stream event and there's flow, we can shut the pumps off if there's a concern with flooding.
Okay, so that's, so there's some,
Right.
yeah.
We got an average flow for a period
Yeah.
of time, and I just use that 3,200 as a measure of the average
Okay.
flow to what would be the impact on Long Lake Refuge. The other one to take into account, and I want to dig into this a little bit further, but have not, obviously the drainage area for Long Lake Refuge is about 700 square miles. And I think in a final analysis from a permit perspective, we take a look at what is the total runoff into Long Lake in acre feet historically based on there's not a USGS gauge down there, so it's kind of an anomaly, but you have to go back and figure out what that is and then say, what is that acre? That is at 3.7% of the total volume going into that system. Those are questions that are probably going to get asked. Now, from that standpoint, take it from Long Lake and continue down the system. Once you pass the outfall structure, you go into Long Lake Creek, and that's where Burleigh County is going to start seeing water. Arguably, with that amount of water coming in the system, I'm not sure how much of it's going to pass through. You know, there's going to be evaporation and losses in the system. And then you go into McKenzie Slough, which is a whole nother area where, you know, it's pretty significant as far as the area that spreads out all over the place. And then it goes into Long Lake Creek and down into Apple Creek. I kind of like, you know, scratched my head a little bit and said, well, we need 3 CFS at McDowell Dam. And, you know, there are times we don't have it. If this was in place, would it get there? I'm guessing it probably wouldn't, just simply because of the stream miles and everything else that takes place. I mean, it's quite a stretch to get there.
Makes sense.
But is that something that, as far as this, you know, PER you guys are looking at completing and getting funding for, would that look at the impacts to Burleigh County as well?
We would look further down the
Potentially.
system at that point in time. Like I said, we're just in the feasibility standpoint. In
Yeah.
other words, can you afford to build it, in
Right.
essence? And the answer is yes. But now we get into the regulatory issues, and we have to start evaluating, you know, do we need easements along the streams? What happens at the refuge? What happens beyond the refuge? All that would be looked at in the PER
Yeah.
from an environmental perspective. Because the refuge is going to ask the question,
Yeah.
so.
Well, and then the individual landowners where you don't have existing easements, I mean, perception, reality, right? Even
Right.
though it's a minor
Absolutely.
amount, it's
Yeah.
on mine, right?
Yeah.
So don't do
Right.
it. Yeah, so all that's gonna be fun. Hey, did we, as part of your process to date, have you looked at, you know, potential cause for this and just natural, any man-made causes that you've identified? or
You know,
looked
we've had a lot of discussion. I want to see if I can go back here. We had a lot of discussion based on the watershed and said, okay, here's our LiDAR. here's what LiDAR tells us, and it's relatively new, it's like 2023, I think. And where are the overflows? And is there drainage that has taken place? I can tell you from a rudimentary search, there's very few drainage permits out there. But are people managing their water on their properties? Yeah, they just do. We did not find anything significant that would say within this 25 square miles that somebody's added 3 or 4 square miles because of a drainage system that somebody dug from that perspective. But yeah, we did take a look at that. There's been a lot of discussion that, well, everybody's putting in drain tile, now the drain tile's causing it. Okay, when 34% of your inflow is from groundwater, you can put a lot of drain tile systems out there and they're not going to add that amount of water. So, but to your point, yeah, there's a discussion as to what's out there and what's permitted and what's not permitted. I suspect in the realm of things, if people were to start filing complaints, then things would be looked at to see whether or not there's some issues. There has been discussion within the global perspective. There are some areas, and I could point them out, but it's kind of immaterial. There are some areas to where there are significant water issues up against roadways that if the system was in place, you could open it up with a drain and take water down to the pump system and get rid of it and have benefits to other areas within the watershed. But that's a management scenario, and obviously, that's not considered. In other words, we're not looking at a drainage project. We're looking at solving the problem at the bottom end.
And most of that watershed is kind of in the plateau, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's not a highly cultivated landscape.
Correct. Yeah, like I said, it's the ice cube tray scenario.
Yeah.
The lower portions have started to overflow down into the bottom into Stink Lake, and the upper portions have not overflowed yet because the water's not there, but what's happening is because the soils, it's basically infiltrating and showing up as groundwater.
Are the wetlands in that watershed, are they following the same trend?
Yes. Yeah, they're basically following the same trend as the increases, though in a lot of cases they go up and down. They don't necessarily have a continuous rise. They've risen to a point to where the groundwater inflow has basically stabilized them. So,
Yeah, Michael, I noticed the pipeline runs right through the Central Dakota irrigation area by, Tappan and Dawson and that area. They have any interest in taking some of that water? I mean, they're irrigating, but.
let me explain this one. We picked an alignment, basically a straight line, that's probably going to meander a little bit when it's all done, just simply from design and head and everything else. This group of landowners, you can see the circles, are going, hey, we'd really like to take water off this system. Couple of aspects. I don't believe we can take water off the system and give it to them as part of an HMGP or a federal project or DWR project. It's just not going to happen. It's not allowed. Even though I look at it from a common sense perspective, it's a way to dispose of the water. But now we're disposing of the water in irrigation, then some of it's going to show back up into the groundwater, so you'd have to look at what the influence is. What we found in the review of the pipes or the well systems out here is that their complaint is that they often have drawdown and don't think that they have enough water. The interesting component of that, Horsehead Lake is kind of off to the northwest. All of the irrigation pump systems out there pump and draw down and are almost short or pure for a while, but the minute they shut off, they go back to the same elevation. So it's not that they don't have adequate groundwater, it's that they don't have an adequate well system to give them the groundwater that they need, or the water supply they need. In other words, the soils isn't getting the water to the well system. So that's kind of what we're seeing out here. But they have actually asked and said, hey, we'd love to tap onto it and pump it for our system when we're short on water or when our systems aren't working. The other one about irrigation, I'll just touch on this because there's all the different pieces. The one landowner who has a bunch of irrigation areas out here, and he said, we just put in the irrigation systems that take care of it. And I said, well, how often did you irrigate this year? He said, well, I turned my system on maybe 3 times. I've had good rain.
Yeah.
And I went, so I need to be pumping irrigation systems 24 hours a day, every day, or 2 feet per year maximum allocation for groundwater supply. Typically it's 18 inches. And if you're not using any because I have a wet season, I'm not helping the lake any. So there's a context of the value of irrigation, though I have encouraged anybody out in this particular area that wants to irrigate, the water's there. I'll be honest with you, and straightforward, DWR has not been making allocations of water. There's a number of people out here looking for permits that they're not issuing because they didn't have the data to support the fact that they could actually issue it and the water would be there. I'm hoping, in the conversation, we actually had a long meeting with DWR to say that's what they're going to be using this for, to look at the availability of water for those systems. So I'm hoping that those who have been waiting will probably get their permits, and others who are looking for water would actually be able to get an allocation.
Makes sense.
The water quality coming off at your project, I mean, is that irrigable water?
As we see it, based on the data that we have, the answer is that's yes. So the other aspect of it is if somebody wanted to drop an irrigation system in the lake and pump water off, that would be fine. They could do that. However, being as how we know where the wells could be located, where they can get the water from the aquifer, I would rather have them go to the aquifer because then they wouldn't have a restriction, because if the lake level got to a certain point, the DWR might say, okay, I'm going to shut you off. So you're better off in a well-drilled system from a long-term supply
But even
perspective.
taking it out of the aquifer could still help the.
Oh,
end result of
absolutely.
water getting to the lake.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
It's,
well, a lot of good information, Michael.
It's been a long time putting it together, and there's obviously a lot more that needs to be done.
Yeah.
This is kind of a brief summary. The issue kind of comes down to, with Burleigh County, the flows are going into the refuge, they're gonna come through the refuge. Arguably, instinct tells me you're probably not gonna see much of it by the time it gets to the refuge and through the refuge system. So, to your point though, it's coming, therefore, like I tossed out the idea
yeah.
of, hey, we need 3 CFS at McDowell Dam, maybe it's here, but I don't think it's gonna, you'll be able to see it in the end run. So,
Just for the-
Similar, opinion on McKinsey Slough?
yeah, Mackenzie Slough is just another large buffer. Once it gets in there, it's gonna spread out. There are obviously complaints around Mackenzie Slough based on the standpoint when it goes dry or when it goes full. Just as background, Roger had a call from a landowner along Mackenzie Slough that was complaining about the box culvert underneath the Interstate 94. Apparently, they've complained about that box culvert before and saying it's too high. When you look how flat it is, it's just the way it is. I mean, when the water gets in there, it spreads out all over the place. And right now, there's a lot of water coming from the refuge area this direction. So, there's a lot of flat ground out there that's flooded. From that complaint standpoint, what I did in consultation with Roger is I got a hold of the regional DOT district engineer, and I forwarded to, that complaint to him because it's basically their culvert, their issue. It was kind of interesting, this, if you want to call it the circle of life. One of the guys in my Fargo office called me and he said, "Did you file this complaint?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, now I got a call from DOT that I got to look at this culvert." And of course, we are looking at it because we're looking at the reconstruction and regrading through that whole Mackenzie Slough area as part of a DOT contract for Houston. So he's going to be providing the background information on the culvert and the analysis that we did for the reconstruction to them, and then they'll get back to the landowner and have the same discussion. Primarily that it was put in the 1960s as far as the original interstate system, and hasn't been changed since, and due to the flat grades, there's no plans to do anything to it, so.
Okay.
The culvert's
good.
been a problem since the 80s.
Appreciate the update, Michael. Any other
Yeah.
questions, thoughts for Michael this morning? And at this point, I don't think there's any action or anything the board needs to take. I mean, as far as an opinion goes with the project, I guess we'll have to see as you gather more information and we get to the next steps and see what those potential impacts could be down in Burleigh County. At that point, we can
Right.
circle back and discuss more. But Catherine?
Is Houston the engineer for this project?
Yes. That's why I'm standing out here
Great.
on the Stutzman County side now. Couple of things on that, just as background information, and I think you've seen probably the emails. There was a Kidder County meeting, commissioner meeting, and the reporter was there from the Steel Ozone, and the Steel Ozone reported that Burleigh County was opposed to the project. I did circle back and I provided the information to Chairman Bittner on the county commission. He hadn't really heard of the project, so I sent him kind of the background information on this as well. So as things go forward, obviously, I've been telling this board periodically that the project is ongoing. We'll get you a copy of the feasibility study. And I suspect on the permitting side of the equation, when it gets to the regulatory side, there'll be comments requested from DWR relative to this as well. I would expect that. So,
Okay,
okay.
very good. Okay,
Long presentation, appreciate the opportunity.
yeah,
Thanks.
very informative. Thanks, Michael. Okay, looking at the other old business this morning, Michael kind of gave an update already on the Burleigh County, the CRS kind of ongoing. And then I don't think there's been any movement on the mitigation plan.
I have talked to Mary. Casey's not here. Burleigh County Highway Department has presented its commentary, and there's some maps that have been updated. And Mary and I will get together probably for an hour in the next 30 days and talk about any comments from this board relative to its projects and stuff. And
Okay.
I can fill you in on what those changes are when we make that, so.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
Okay.
No other old business. We can move on to new business this morning. Item on there, I guess, Roger, the Missouri River Joint Board EAE program contribution for 2025.
Right, so, I can't remember how the discussion went last month, but, last year we had a donation of, 20,000.
And
Did they act? Yeah.
Okay, and so, I guess I would.
Was it 7,500? That was the number that I was thinking. Is,
That's what I thought it was.
okay.
That sounds
So-
right.
Yeah.
I guess
And
the,
we're just waiting for an invoice. We did approve it last meeting.
Oh,
Okay.
and I was supposed to get a hold of, and I neglected to do that, so I need to put that on my list.
Okay.
I'll do that this afternoon.
Okay. All righty. And- Yeah.
Okay, we got a problem again. We have a group of young people who seem to feel that wire cutters need to be tested. But it has been fixed. We also did go in and spray and mow. The weeds are down a tish, just a tish. So we may have to do 3 sprayings this year instead of 2. And if I remember correctly, I did ask for 3 sprayings when we passed it. The cowboys are doing a good job of checking things out there. Before this little incident, I picked up a couple of bags of garbage again. It seems to be a favorite spot to dump your beer cans. And I've talked to the highway patrol guys and the sheriff's department, not much you can do about it. So, but it's flowing well. We don't have a major weed problem at this point. And I think if we do spray it this year, we'll see even less next year.
So we sprayed once this year?
So far, so
Okay.
far.
So they're thinking, as Cowboys thinking a second one and
I
potentially
mean,
a third?
Possibly a third.
Okay.
We tried to get the weeds as they were coming up. And we did a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that before this incident. But I do definitely know they're gonna have to spray a second time and possibly a third.
Okay.
Wormwood is hard to kill out. I didn't realize that.
I'm recalling too, Kathleen, there was discussions on spraying for cattails versus the weeds
Yeah,
on top
yeah.
and on the back slope and things.
Correct.
Have they sprayed for the cattails?
Not at this point.
Okay, are they starting to?
Well, we're still we're still in negotiations, let's put it
Okay.
that way about it. We've talked about spraying them, and I'm told the best time to spray them is probably the end of this month.
Oh, okay.
So I've made a couple of phone calls, have not received callbacks to find out from chemical people when they suggest doing this.
I think Cowboys should be able to tell us what they're
Well, yeah.
recommending. Yeah, and I don't know, Travis, you've been out there. Is the cattails starting to become?
I don't think they're that major.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not seeing new growth in the cattail, or I didn't when I was up there, and that's probably 3 weeks ago. So I think our spraying is being effective, but we gotta do it again.
Get you later.
Okay. And then there were some repairs to some fences, I think.
Yeah, we
Travis,
got,
you did that?
Travis took care of those for me, and it was minimal cost, if I recall correctly, like. Oh, okay, you're gonna do that soon, though. Yeah,
Yeah, I guess consensus of the board to have Travis go out there and make those fence repairs.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
Is there a wire you can't cut? I know that's a silly question.
Electric wire, maybe? Yeah.
Well, battery charger would do it.
Yeah. Put up some high voltage signs that usually keeps people away.
Not a bad idea, I'll look into that, James.
Okay. Anything else on Bird Creek?
No, we're
All
good.
right. Okay, additional correspondence, for any plats or stormwater management plans, can be available upon request. You see a couple of the subdivisions there in your, that have been
Yep.
submitted to us for review. If you want to take a look at those, you certainly can. Can move on to item 13, approval of this month's bills.
You made me laugh and then I swallowed wrong. So, board members, on page 34 is a summary of the bills. A few things to note. We have a bond payment for Apple Valley in the amount of almost 17,000. Included in this month's bills are the payment for the McDowell Bank stabilization, about 87,000. Some Apple Creek slide bills there that are fairly significant, and then I think we have 2 months of Houston Engineering bills. I don't think we had any last month, so math checks out. Everything looks good. I would move for approval of payment of bills in the amount of $220,357.59.
Second.
Okay, got a motion by Manager Reap and a second by Manager Jones to approve and pay this month's bills. Wendy, take roll call vote, please.
Manager Mitchell,
Yes.
Manager Reed,
Yes.
Manager Jones. Yes. Manager Smith.
Yes.
Chairman Landenberger.
Yes, motion passes. Bills are approved and paid, or will be paid. Okay, remaining information in your packet there, just kind of some more details on this month's billing. Our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, September 10th at 8 a.m. in the same room. Everybody can make that meeting? Okay. Quick question, I guess, Michael, or have we heard anything on the Chase DeWitt's drain tile?
No, have not received anything back from him relative to ownership, so.
Okay, we're still waiting on that additional
Yep.
information, right? Okay.
We made aware that he has to have ownership of the property in order to put the project on it. And so he may be waiting until he closes on the property and actually has his name on the deed before he can move forward.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Okay, if there's nothing else, no other business before the board, we are adjourned.